So we got Martine by Nick Vaca. Late autumn in Tracy was always a frightening experience for me. The west winds blowing from San Francisco would raise the dust from the surrounding harvested farm fields, and a brown sheet of dust would settle over Tracy. So what's Tracy? Name of a town. So it's a place, not a person. And we know we're in California outside San Francisco. The clear blue skies of summer would begrudgingly accept the gray clouds of autumn, and I knew that the bitter cold and damp fog of the San Joaquin Valley winter would soon descend upon us. The winds would dance, and the settling sun would become a crimson red, a red that filled the entire west skies. And I, in my fertile and imaginative youth, believed that the world would soon end. The fact that mornings would follow such horrible evenings never dispelled my belief that the world would be consumed by a fiery hell with a red sky as its herald. I made a promise to myself that I would never play outside when such a red sky predicted the death of the world. So awesome was the nature of these skies that I broke the solemn promise only once in my entire youth. What can we start to tell about narrator? Pardon? We got a young narrator. What pronouns are getting used? I. So what kind of narrator do we have? We got first person narrator, so we seem to have a young youth who is part of the story. Mark, what are you going to say? Okay, and so we get an idea that the childish, just from talking about his entire youth. Also, anytime he sees a red sky, what does he think is going to happen? The world is going to come to an end. So while there might be some childish viewpoints that Santa Claus will come down my chimney, or I need to leave cookies out for him so that he'll come back next year, this belief would be anytime you see a crimson red sky, that means the world is going to come to an end.
So every time the sun is setting or rising.
As long as it's consumed in that fiery hell with the red sky as its herald, yeah. Now, the sun setting, you don't always get that, but yeah, otherwise, pretty much. All right.
Enjoy your evening.
Jack, you want to do next paragraph?
Just the second one?
Yep.
My thoughts were not occupied with the destruction of the world. My days were spent in idle playtime. My playmates were never outside. My family and they were usually limited to guitar and...
Caterino?
My older brother and Vincent, my cousin.
Our pronunciation, or like it would basically be Vincent, but Vicente. So we got a little kid who he usually spends his time with is going to be his cousin and his older brother with Caterino and Vicente.
It was not that I disliked any of the other children in the neighborhood, but our family was so large that I never had any reason to go outside of it for friends. Besides, the three of us seldom fought, and I saw no reason to upset our tranquil relationship. But though we never played with the other children in the neighborhood, we were nevertheless well acquainted and on good terms with them. We would roam our neighborhood, challenge kids to a quick and vicious game of marbles, defeat them, then move on to other parts of the neighborhood and search for further conquest. The houses in which we, the dirty brown children of our part of our little town, lived would have been rustic had it not been for the misery that
Permeate, yep.
They were usually constructed by the owners with lumber that did not always meet exact dimensions. There was rarely a uniform type. The houses, I thought, sagged more from weight of the sorrow within than from the lack of adequate construction. There were no sidewalks, just extended front yards that fused with the dust of the road.
Okay, so what are some details we're picking up in this paragraph so far as like where they're living?
Details of the home.
So, and the details of the homes, positive or negative?
Negative.
Okay, they tend to be kind of negative. So, the houses in which the dirty brown children of our part of town lived would have been rustic had it not been for the misery that permeated them. They were usually constructed by the owners with lumber that did not always meet exact dimensions or was rarely of uniform type. So you get the sense that kind of whatever cast-off lumber they would use. Since it says built by the owners of the house, that would mean that these people are not the owners, but they would be the renters, and you get the sense that, seems to be pretty poor. The houses, I thought, sagged more from the weight of the sorrow from within them than from the lack of adequate construction. So the use of the term sorrow would be a pretty strong tone, mood word to kind of let you know what that overall atmosphere would be like. So the things that they play outside, talks about playing marbles or running around with the neighborhood. They don't talk about playing, certain sports with like baseball or football or soccer balls, because it's possible that they don't have the means to get those kinds of things. All right, so seems to be a pretty unpleasant situation that they could be in at this point. The bizarre construction of the houses and the haphazard location of the lots provided many alleys that afforded us private areas of play. It was usually in these alleys that we would spend most of our playtime during the summer and the late autumn months playing marbles, cars, or whatever our combined imaginations happened to produce. So simple game like marbles, or you're doing imaginary things just to try to keep yourself occupied. Nate Brackman, why don't you do the next paragraph?
One late afternoon, during a lull in our activities, we became aware of an intrusion in our neighborhood. As the sun was shedding its final shafts of light and the west wind was beginning its wicked dance, making the dust race through the alleys, a small, dark woman stumbled into the alley where we were playing. Stopped, cupped her leathery hand to her mouth, and shouted in the wind, "Martin," and then shuffled away.
What's the word intrusion imply?
Intruded.
It's an intruder, so you're not like a welcomed entrance is coming in. And so she is the one who shouts out Martine and then kind of shuffles away, so we don't know quite who this person is going to be. Josh, how about you go next?
When we were sure that she was out of hearing range,
Vicente.
Vicente began an analysis of her. Because her hair was drawn tightly from her forehead, braided, and set atop her head so that they formed dikes, he concluded that she was from Mexico. Her eyes, set in deep sockets, her high cheekbones, dark leathery skin, and pure white teeth, further convinced Vicente that she had just arrived from Mexico. Her dress reached her ankles, and her thinning red sweater had several holes in missing buttons. She had a small belly, which she used as a resting place for her folded arms. From this observation, I added that she had a lot of children. I knew this because my mother had the same type of belly, and she had 10 children.
Okay, so family coming in from Mexico. We know that it has a son, Martine, but we don't know a whole lot about them otherwise. How'd you describe her clothes?
Raggedy.
Yeah, kind of ragged. Matt, you want to do next paragraph at the top of the page?
After Vicente had completed his analysis of the woman, our thoughts turned to Martine. The name Martine fascinated us more than did the woman. We had never seen him before, and largely because of that, because we delighted in imagining how produced by pronouncing his name lent itself very nicely to many rhymes, but the one that we enjoyed most was Martine El Violin.
This would be Martine El Violin. So Martin the violin. So if you ever went to elementary school or high school with someone named like Anna, what do you rhyme her name with? Anna, banana.
My brother's
Jack.
cat is Anu, and we say Anu, but not Anu.
Lip drip.
Yeah, I was thinking Brendan wouldn't really work so well, but lip drip.
That's a rap lyric.
Sippy lippy.
Gotta do. Cool flip.
Dylan. The villain.
Nate.
Ooh. What?
Nate and 8. That's my favorite number, that's why.
That's why 7, 8, 9.
Do you wear number 8?
I know.
No, you should. Nate, what's your jersey number?
7's like.
Basketball.
You also,
That doesn't work.
you also can't wear 8 as a lineman.
could get an 8 in there somewhere. 28, 38, 48, 68.
74.
No correlation with 8 at all.
Take 3 from that 7 and then add 14.
I won 78, so.
Yet, for all our fantasies and vivid imaginations, none of us could really satisfactorily imagine how he looked, not until one afternoon when the wind from the west began its piercing song, and the convulsing dust-covered rooftops and the west skies turned a crimson red. Uh-oh, turning crimson red, so this means the world's going to come to an end. As I was ready to leave our back alley and flee the horror of the red sky, Martine appeared in the alley with a whirlwind of dust dancing about him. He was awfully small, much smaller than any of us had ever imagined him to be, and when I saw how thin he was, I thought to myself how very appropriate was the rhyme that we had created. Not only was he small, but he was unbelievably skinny. Yet strangely enough, right in the middle of his thin and frail body was an enormous belly, as huge as the basketball with which we played. It was his enormous belly that caused us to immediately dislike him. Why would they dislike him?
Big belly.
And what would be the connotation then?
He's gonna eat them food.
If he has a large belly, again, based on what we know about the people, it seems that life is pretty difficult. If he has a large belly, that could mean that he is well fed, and so there could certainly be jealousy that would be taking place. For us, and we get this here in the next line, for us, a large belly meant that a person ate well, too well. When my mother would take us with her on one of her rare shopping trips to Stockton, we would walk down the sidewalks and enviously watch the men with their fat bellies and puffy cheeks and wish that we could, just for once in our lives, eat as much as we wanted. We would imagine that their meals consisted of entire chickens, steaks, potatoes, and all the trimmings that we knew must certainly accompany such a feast. Perhaps I hated Martine more than the others because of his belly. It was this intense dislike for him and his belly that made me forget the monstrous significance of the red sky. We inspected him as closely as we could, trying to discern as much about him as possible through the sheet of dust. His face was scarred and dotted with white spots, and his rat-like teeth would sparkle in the evening sun as he spoke to his younger brother. His hair was cut very short, giving him his only semblance of neatness. His clothes were dirty, and his shirt failed to completely cover his belly. His short pants displayed a pair of skinny legs that I found difficult to believe could support his belly. It was only his shoeless, callous feet and filthy arms that made him the appearance of a scarred lemur ready to flee at the first sign of danger. So, big belly, but otherwise, what are we looking at? Twig. But someone who doesn't have shoes, teeth, says rat-like, so you get the sense that they're not well manicured. Not a person who seems to have, all the luxury items that they would be so envious of, except for what? Food. Logan, you want to do the next paragraph? Even if we had wanted to start a conversation?
Even if we had wanted to start a conversation, the strong wind would have prevented it. As it was, we simply stared at each other. We stared in a slightly eternity?
Yep, eternity.
An eternity that was broken when Martine languidly picked up a clod from the ground and threw it at us. Calmly and simply, no reason, he just threw it. He missed, and he had made a terrible mistake. He had given us a reason to hurt him and his belly. His throw had come closest to my cousin, who quickly responded with a practiced hand, but this throw was too late. And from within, his replica had managed to escape behind the wooden fence that bordered the alley.
So you got Martine and his little brother. You got the narrator, Vicente, and Caterino. And what does Martine do? Picks up a big clod of dirt and throws it at him. Languidly would mean like you kind of, like very smoothly. That it's not something that you pick up and like you have to really take back and throw hard, but you just like kind of naturally pick it up. So a pitcher in baseball would have a very languid motion, hopefully. It's not herky-jerky. So they've never talked before. I walk up, little Brendan with his fat belly picks up this big thing of dirt and chucks it at me. What do you mean you wish?
I'm 92 pounds. I need some fat. I have zero body fat.
It's not true.
So you wish you had the belly. You don't wish that you threw the big cloud of dirt at me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Not a good way to start a conversation or any kind of relationship here. Tommy, how about the next paragraph? Last one on the page.
It was not an instant showdown between Martine and ourselves. He would throw and duck, and the clods would burst into 1,000 pieces against the side of the house. He would throw, duck, and miss. We managed to miss each other for 10 minutes of intense battle. This type of warfare was not at all unfamiliar to us, and we had managed to develop antics and even particular strategies for winning battles. When we tired of this particular phase of our encounter with Martine, we decided to utilize one of our more fundamental plans for fishing him out into the open. Near the north side of our house, there was a large hole which we had been dug for rubbish, and since the rubbish had not yet been dumped into it, we decided that it afforded us an excellent opportunity to stage a deep well. The hole had a small mound of dirt that faced the west, and we decided to place my worn red cap a very small distance behind the mound and weigh it down with stones to keep the wind from blowing it away. The position of the cap gave the appearance to those that viewed it and that I had hidden in the hole. We anticipated that Martine would see it, and believing that I was in a very vulnerable position, would openly attack me. When our
Meticulous.
plan had been set, the three of us waited, panting with excitement. We didn't have to wait long. Martine, an obvious novice in this game, quickly understood the seeming vulnerability of my position and crept as closely as he possibly could. When he felt that he in the best possible position, he slowly got up. The dust and weed slowly falling from his palms and knees reached into the makeshift hopsack satchel containing his ammunition and began throwing clods as fast and fiercely as his thin arms could hurl them. He was a real pigeon. We came out of our hiding place and Caterina shouted, "Martine."
Okay, so you got like there on each side, you got this little hole here where they put the hat, so it's a way to kind of draw him out. As he comes out to try to attack the hat, he's in open position, and then they can start whaling him away with the clods of dirt. Why are you chuckling, Nate? No, but probably fairly dry, and so you're taking these. If it's a clod of dirt, usually it means you kind of have like the dried out grass and roots with it. So if you've ever had to like say come springtime, you redo like a garden bed, like you might re-edge. You take these little clods of dirt out, which aren't too heavy. But once you get 3, 4, 5 of them in like the garbage can, it gets to be pretty heavy to kind of lug around. So it's not that it's like little sprinkles of dirt, but it would be a fairly heavy clod of it that could do a little bit of damage. It'd be like having a snowball fight, but you're not going to do a snowball fight in autumn. If you hit Nate just the right way with that snowball, you can do some serious damage. If you got 3 kids throwing big clods of dirt at you, and you're size of Brendan with a little fat belly, it could start to hurt after a while. Adrian, you want to do next paragraph, please?
He turned, his eyes wide with the knowledge that he had been fooled, and met a hail of clods. One hit him on the temple, my throat, one sunk deeply into his belly, and as he turned to flee into the shadows of the alley, another bit into his back. He ran until he felt that he was safely out of throwing distance, turned, his cheeks streaming with tears, his face distorted by anger, anguish, and hurt, picked up a clod and made a last futile gesture of defiance as he hurled it in our direction. The weed-embedded clod fell 10 feet short of its target. We had won a real victory. What a fool he was, we all agreed. He deserved it, yes, of course, but not really. Why in the heck haven't we thrown the darn clod in the first place? We must have known you'd lose.
Okay, so yeah, why in the world did he start this whole battle? You had to know that you were outnumbered and probably going to lose at some point. When my brother and cousin had gone inside the house to eat dinner, I slowly walked to the place where he had made his last defiant gesture. The darkness of night was beginning, and the last rays of red were disappearing from the sky. The wind whistled in my ears as I stopped to examine the area of his last stand and noticed a small gray cast-iron cap pistol with a broken trigger. I assumed that it must belong to him. I bent and retrieved it from its bed of dust. My first impulse was to keep it, to slip it into my pocket and walk back to the house and display it as part of the booty of our last battle. But I didn't. I placed the gun in my pocket and walked into the part of the alley where I had seen Martine disappear. As often as his mother had come out into the alley and called his name, none of us really knew where he lived. I walked into the night and crept by the wooden house, examining each one, trying to figure out which one contained Martine and his enormous belly. The darkness of the night had forced the houses to light their windows, and as I walked by each house, I would peer into them, trying to see Martine's face. I finally decided that he must live in the trailer that had recently appeared in the vacant lot in the Gonzalez's backyard. With this assurance, I headed toward the dark, windowless wooden trailer that looked as if Martine had built it. I approached the door and knocked softly, still not sure that this was the right place, and then I heard a soft passe, and instantly I knew that it was Martine's house. I was reluctant and yet anxious to enter the house. Reluctant because I knew that he must surely have told his mother of our battle, and anxious because I knew that it was supper time, and I would get to see the food that made Martine so fat. I walked up the last step, being very careful not to fall, and gently pushed the door open so that a thin shaft of light pierced the cold night. A strange odor struck my nose as I took my first step into the small trailer. It was kerosene. I hadn't smelled kerosene since our family had left the labor camp in Ohio 5 years ago. How could he eat so well and still use kerosene lamps? I thought to myself as I took my final step into the trailer. Because the light was very dim, I didn't immediately notice Martine and his mother, but as my eyes grew accustomed to the dimness of the trailer, I saw him sitting on an empty lard can turned upside down. Tears were slowly moving down her cheeks as Martine quietly sobbed in her arms. I placed the gun on the floor, reached behind my back, and grabbed the door, and began to slowly retreat into the cold night. As I left, my eyes made a final sweeping movement, searching for the table that contained the food that made Martine so fat. On a weather-worn table with peeling red paint, dinner was set. There lay the food that made Martine so enviable in our eyes, a small stack of corn tortillas and a glass of water. You got a look of confusion on your face.
You got their neck.
Dude, I love
So what does he eat?
Tortillas and water.
Tortillas and water, which big time meal, pretty meager meal. Pretty meager.
For me, that's bad.
So maybe for you. So why is his belly so fat?
He's just fat.
If you see pictures or when they have commercials where organizations are trying to get funding for, like, say, third world nations, Red Cross is trying to get donations to send food to other places. You'll see pictures of people, and you'll see folks that look very frail. So thin arms, legs, you might see sockets in the eyes that are kind of sunken. You'll also, and this tends to happen with children, you'll see pictures of children with very thin arms and legs, but that have a large belly.
Sounds like my aunt.
What happens if a child, especially, is extremely malnourished, their stomach becomes bloated. So why is his stomach, listen up, so why is his stomach so big? Not because he has eaten a lot of food, but because he has hardly eaten any food at all. So part of the irony is initially, why are they so hateful towards him, or at least so envious? Look at his big belly of all the food that he's able to eat. In reality, he has a big belly because he hardly has any food to eat whatsoever. And this isn't to say who knows why he started throwing dirt at him and things like that, but when it talks about a futile gesture to try to throw mud and all that stuff, the kid probably has hardly any strength to him whatsoever, so there's no way he's even going to be able to kind of keep up in any kind of battle of throwing snowballs or dirt balls and all that kind of stuff. So the main thing about him, not a lot of food, lack of food, such to the point that his body is malnourished, therefore his stomach becomes bloated. Tomorrow, I'm going to show you the writing assignment that we're going to do with it. We don't have like a reading check quiz or anything like that we're doing, or active reading assignment. I'll show you the prompt, and then we'll go back over the text, so keep it out in your handout section. We'll look for examples that might kind of help you with the essay, and I'll explain how this whole essay process is going to work. All right? Vocab member Monday.
Where does brother go?
Yeah, Phil's going to ring quickly, but...